So today we're going to talk a little bit about coping with anxiety, depression, loneliness, and moods. And we're going to do this in a way where I'm not clinically defining all of these. Because I've done this in the MS Mental Wellness Chat quite a bit. We're going to really dive into resources, maybe define a little bit of loneliness, but we are going to stay focused on coping and things that we can do, things that we can control. And so I'd like to thank Viatris, our sponsor for tonight's mental wellness chat. And then I always like to thank the MS Views and News, because without them, this mental wellness chat would not even exist. We came up with it during COVID, and it has been a really great program and has connected with so many people. Before we get started, if you don't know me, my name is Jessica Thomas. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I have about 20 years experience working with people living with multiple sclerosis and living with chronic disease. And my passion really is to help people kind of find emotional wellness and the emotional balance within physical disease, because when you have a physical disease, it often impacts the emotional side. So I am from North Carolina. I am not traveling for Thanksgiving. I'm just kind of traveling outside to another city, so not too far. And a mood check-in. So I've had just kind of a relaxed mood. It's been a little bit of a dreary day here, and I had a day off from work. So did some fun things with my father-in-law earlier. I'll talk about that in the presentation. But now we've got some people chiming in. So we've got Anne-Marie from Cleveland. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can get this to work. It's been a while since she's joined. She's having some pain today. Anne-Marie, I'm so glad that you're on, especially knowing that you have some pain. I know it's not an easy thing to cope with, and so I'm so glad that you're on today. We have Melissa from Destin, Florida. Dion from South Jersey. She's a little exhausted today. Dion, thank you for being here. Sherry from Michigan, not new, kind of down, probably due to the holiday. Well, Sherry, you are in the right place. I am so glad that you're here with us today. We have David from the Bahamas. Julie from California is not new, but feeling cold. And John is tired, but feeling peaceful and content. I am so glad to hear that. And then we have Linda from California, at the moment feeling calm and mellow. It's good to see you. And Paula from Oregon, not new. She had to missed last month. She had forgot. I am so glad that you're here this month. And so if you missed last month, you can always catch it on the YouTube channel. And I'm down because of the holiday too. Well, goodness gracious, I'm glad that you guys are here, because we're going to talk a little bit about this today, because sometimes the holidays can really they can be exciting and happy and positive, but sometimes they make difficult feelings be here too. And so we have Becky from Virginia. She is new. Becky, thank you for being here today and for trying out the mental wellness chat. And she is feeling so. We're going to move on to our next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about gratitude. And so for those that are not feeling that great today, this is not to cast a ray of sunshine and to say that you need to feel good. I just wanted to talk about gratitude for just a good minute, because gratitude is something that is really helpful for us to practice. Tomorrow at Thanksgiving, people often will say what I call Thanksgiving gratitudes, big things that they're grateful for. It might be their health, or the meal that they have, or it might be their family, et cetera, et cetera. But I think those gratitudes are great. But I think the gratitude that is most helpful for us is to really chase the small, tiny gratitudes, the little things that happen in our day that make the day a little bit lighter, things that maybe that you can see that others can't see. And I'll give you some examples of gratitude. And the reason why practicing gratitude like this is because it enforces some positive increase of your brain chemicals, endorphins, serotonin, et cetera. And you tend to feel a little bit more positive when you're practicing gratitude. It doesn't mean that everything is great around you. It just means that you're able to find some of the good things. So So what I would say, an example of gratitude, small things, is that I walked outside today and I had the most beautiful sunset, and I love when I catch a pretty sunset. So that was a small gratitude of mine. A bigger gratitude was my father-in-law was sweet, and he made me breakfast. He invited me over for breakfast today. And that was a very kind and nice thing to do, something we have never done before. And it was very random, but very appreciated because I was off and I didn't have anything to do. So, so as you are thinking about today's program and tonight's program, I want you to think a little bit about gratitude and maybe some small things that that you saw or that you noticed that kind of just made you feel a little bit happy or peaceful. Maybe you heard something. Sometimes when I'm picking up my son from school, I hear children playing in the elementary school parking lot, and hearing all the laughter and the silliness really makes me laugh and smile, and I'm always grateful for that because it's just a little bit of brightness. So we're going to move on to our next slide. And so big elephant in the room. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and holidays again can bring a lot of emotions. It can bring positive, sad, stressful, etc. I wanted to engage you. What are your holiday plans? What are you doing? And then I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, and you can use the question box for this if you would like. You also can just kind of, keep it to yourself if you want, either way. But I want you to think about, so what are your holiday plans? And then beyond that, do you feel surrounded? Do you feel connected? Are you feeling alone tonight? Do you feel content? Do you feel stressed or tired? There might be another feeling. I put a lot of different emotions there. And I will get us started because I always like to give you time. So my holiday plans is I'm going to my sister-in-law's house, and we will have a family Thanksgiving, and then we come home, and then after that I'm going to go to a friend's house. I'm looking forward to both. I'm not feeling stressed because I'm only making cranberry sauce. That's my secret. Is not to sign up for too much stuff. But I can be honest and say that sometimes Thanksgiving, it's such a great holiday and it has a lot of fun, but sometimes there's a little bit of sadness too because I don't have some of the family that I miss really close to me. And then as my son is getting older, we're not doing some of the same traditions, etc. So that's a common, normal thing. So I'm going to, it doesn't look like anybody is responding to these, but so we'll move. Oh, actually we have, they just all came in at once. Okay. So Becky let's see, Linda is baking and cooking 3 dishes, and we'll go to her son's house, and she always tries to make it for her parents who are now gone. So it's more of a tradition, it sounds like. David said family gathering. Julie said going to husband's side. Paula says alone. My son's working right now and tomorrow. So we're going to talk a little bit about alone and loneliness. And maybe there might be some, and you may be fine with that, but there might be some tools or strategies that might, and ideas that might help if you're alone. Dion says, I'm staying at home. I got a call this afternoon. My son is driving up from Georgia. So I am glad that your son is on the way. And then we have John that's running a Thanksgiving 5K with his son, and that is very cool, John. I will be taking a walk myself, and I hope that that we'll talk a little bit about exercise too and how that's so important and good for our mood. So we're going to move on to our next. If you still want to chime in, feel free to chime in about. So we're going to talk a little bit about mental wellness, loneliness, mental health symptoms, and MS. We're going to talk about that, integrate that into this, and then coping. And really, the focus is going to be on coping between all of these. And we'll move on to our next slide. So understanding MS and emotional wellness and mental health symptoms. So we know that with MS that often comorbid, right beside MS, you can experience mental health symptoms. You can experience anxiety, depression, sometimes mood changes. And it's important to know. So MS, a lot of MS is invisible. Some of MS is visible as well. But if you're experiencing any mental health symptoms, to talk to your doctor. Mental health symptoms, I am going to mess up that word, I think, all tonight. Um, Often, what they do is they're like an iceberg. You might see the tip of it, but and people can see maybe the tip of it, but really there's so much more going on beneath the surface. And while there's not a cure for MS, there's cure for treatments and some of the symptoms, etc. But there definitely is treatments and resources and things that are helpful for any emotional mental health symptoms that you're experiencing or mood changes, etc. So there is a direct connection often between MS and mental health symptoms, and generally for the population too. There's a stronger connection as well. We're seeing a lot more mental health awareness, but I just want to reinforce that as well. So we're going to move on to our next slide. And I just put here, you're not alone, I promise. I think often we feel alone, or we can feel alone in whatever it is that we're experiencing, especially if we're dealing with challenges or stressors. And so I, just wanted to reinforce today and tonight that if you are, however you are feeling, you are not alone. There is somebody out there that probably is feeling a very similar way and can identify with that. Now, this is not the same as loneliness, and I'll talk a little bit about loneliness here in a minute. But I always like to just say you're not alone, and I just want to reinforce that because often with when you're living with a disease like a chronic disease, and and others in your family don't experience it or your friends don't understand it, sometimes it can actually feel a little bit isolating. So thank you for being here. And we're going to move on to our next slide. And we're going to talk a little bit about understanding loneliness. So loneliness is a sense of isolation, sadness. And I brought up this really neat picture earlier, and it talked about the difference of alone and being lonely. Because many of us probably can definitely identify with being alone at times, and maybe many of us can identify with being lonely at times. Lonely is a feeling that I can experience sometimes, and I have had to learn to mitigate that feeling myself. So alone is a state without being lonely, leading to self-awareness. So kind of alone, you're kind of feeling just okay. Lonely is marked by a sense of isolation. Alone feels calm. It's being somewhere with nothing other than your thoughts. So it's kind of peaceful. And you may have had times that being alone gives you a sense of solitude and feels good. Whereas being lonely, there's a constant feeling that kind of follows you. You don't have a sense of contentment with it. Alone is listening to the things that you have to say to yourself. Loneliness makes you wonder, why? Why is this happening to me? Why do I feel this way? Alone is taking a break and freeing oneself from the world, unplugging. Loneliness is a feeling that can kind of consume you. Alone is a positive state of engagement with yourself. It can feel empowering. Sometimes I take myself to a dinner alone, and that feels really good. But loneliness can make you yearn for the company of other people. Long-term loneliness can lead to depression, and it actually can have some pretty significant impacts on your social determinants of health and can impact your overall well-being. So it's important to identify and check in with yourself. Am I enjoying my time alone, or am I feeling lonely? Am I empowered with this time, or am I yearning to be with other people? So I'm gonna just make sure I didn't miss anyone. Becky said that her family's coming here more than she expected, so that's a little bit stressful. and she is coming off of 5 months of illness and mobility challenge. Don't want to be around so many people. If anyone has any suggestions for Becky, please feel free to share, because we all probably have had a holiday where we've had a lot more people around us, and have had to entertain, etc. So if there's any suggestions that you have, please. Please, and then we will also work on some suggestions as we're going through the material and the content. But Becky, I'm so glad that you're taking time to take care of you right now and giving yourself space. So to move on to our next slide, one of the things that's important to know about loneliness, and actually I would say any mood changes or any changes in how you're feeling, et cetera, is identifying the triggers. Recognizing the personal things that come to you that may attribute or exacerbate that feeling of loneliness, or may make you have feelings of sadness or anxiety, etc. So we can definitely say that for Becky, giving the example right now with her family coming in and just being just free of being been sick for a good while. That a trigger is going to be being around a lot of people. You may have actually also like very common triggers that happen in your day to weekly life that you realize, oh, that makes me feel a little bit more lonely if this kind of happens this way, or if or I tend to feel anxious or more sad, etc. I'll give you examples because I was writing down some earlier. So I was thinking about trends. So I'm a very scheduled person, and I know some of you guys are very scheduled as well. And so when I have an unscheduled day, an unplanned day, that can kind of throw me off a little bit. And that, unless I have a plan in place, that can kind of like maybe trigger a little bit of feeling anxious, or trigger a little bit of loneliness if I don't schedule or time to do something either empowering by being alone, or etc. Also having just kind of lack of activities, and then being home for long spans of time without being around people. Now, for some people, that would not impact them at all. But if you notice or have any triggers that you experience that can trigger any mood changes or even a sense of loneliness, please feel free to share. Becky, Linda says, be okay to excuse yourself to regroup. That's really great advice. So thank you, Linda, for sharing that. So giving yourself a time to kind of back off. I just got done taking a treatment that compromises my immune system a little bit, and I had a lot of work travel and had to be around a lot of people, and that caused a lot of stress for me, a little bit of anxiety even. And so one of the things that I did was I mitigated. I kind of would back out of big groups of people. I didn't hang out with a lot of people at one time. If things were just too crowded, too busy, I kind of stepped away. And so that's a really good advice, Linda. Thank you so much for sharing. So we're going to move on to our next slide right here, building coping strategies. So highlighting strategies that coping mechanisms such as practicing mindfulness, journaling, maybe painting, listening to music. And if you have anything specific that you like to do, you may actually see or might be able to seek social connections through the support of some clubs or hobbies, etc. For example, I'm just using my example. I like to paint some, and so I've randomly whenever I can, very randomly and spontaneously, I'll go to our. We have a senior arts center, and I know I'm not really a senior yet. I know, but I will go and take a couple classes, and it just gets me around people, and the really cool people. Actually, I think that sometimes the aging population is some of the coolest people we have, and but that has been a really great way to take something that I like to do and extend it to like a social connection. There's also those like wine and design classes, things like that, that you could paint or whatever. But thinking about, is there something that I love to do where I could actually do it with other people too? It might be a yoga class or even a mindfulness meditation class, etc. We're going to move on to our next slide. An effective communication. So providing guidance to the people that care about you, your friends, your family, your doctors, your healthcare professionals, and really working hard to let people know if you are struggling with a sense of loneliness. Because you can be actually not in, you can be in a house full of people and still feel lonely sometimes. And so it's important to communicate to your family as you're kind of finding what you need to help you cope with that. So we have Linda that says, I go to a senior center as well. Well, Linda, I know you personally, so I know that you're not a senior too, and so I'm glad that you do that as well. And then Anne Marie says, when I get up to it, I paint animals on my wall. So that is a cool kind of creative thing to do. So making sure that you're communicating. And to the people that you love, that care for you, that you are struggling with loneliness. Sometimes loneliness looks invisible. I had a conversation one time with a family member, and I remember telling her, as my aunt, and I remember telling her, sometimes I just kind of feel alone or lonely, and she said, me too. And I never would have thought it. And so I encourage you, if you're feeling that way, to make sure that you're sharing that with people that love you. Because chances are they might be feeling it too, or they might be able to help you as you're working through it. We'll move to our next slide. We're going to talk for just a hot second about technology and social media usage. So social media, the love, hate, plus, minus, positive, negative, all of these things. Social media can give us connection if we use it the right way. Absolutely, hands down. If we have it well balanced, that's even better. But also social media can be hard for us too sometimes, because we, especially during the holidays or certain times, you might feel like you're not as doing as good enough as other people, etc. And remember that people only post the highlight reel. And chances are, if you are stressed about the holidays, you have a little bit of stress going on, you are not the only one. But you might not see the post of somebody that's stressed. You might see the post of everybody when they're smiling in that moment. Sherry said, I'm in a household of 5 but still feel loneliness like an outsider. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sherry. I'm thankful for that, because I know that you're not alone in that sense. So one way so social media really can kind of like exacerbate loneliness if you're looking at it through the eyes of I'm not good enough, I'm not connected, I wasn't invited to the party, etc. But if you're looking at it from that is their highlight reel, and maybe as an opportunity to try to connect with people, that might be positive connections and positive interactions. It can be a positive thing too. So it's a good bad thing, but it's important to mention, because it can actually help with loneliness, and also it can actually exacerbate it too sometimes. We're going to move on to our next slide and talk a little bit about community engagement and community involvement. And so if you're dealing with loneliness, you're dealing with feeling disconnected, I encourage you to see if there's things going on in your community that you can get involved with. Maybe it's volunteer work or local events. I'm going to ask you your advice. What are things that you do to find out what's going on in your community? And I will get us started. So I sometimes will go onto Facebook events and I'll see what's going on, because sometimes there might be a musician playing that I might be interested in, or there might be an art class. That's how I learned about the senior center. There may be a craft fair, and that's a fun thing. I did that recently. So I kind of look at social media, and then I also look and ask. I'll ask people if there's anything going on. Some people may encourage you to join certain groups. There might be groups depending on your community, et cetera. But what do you do to kind of find out what's going on in your community? Please share if you want to. And then I'm going to move on to professional support and resources. So if you're struggling with really any mood changes that are, pretty significant, or depression or anxiety, or you don't even know if you're struggling with them, or you're struggling with grief or loss, or you're just feeling sad, please talk with a mental health professional. And the reason why, you can start the conversation with your doctor, your physician, and get a referral to a mental health professional. But you don't have to do this alone, because feeling bad and things being hard, it's hard enough to live with those, but it's so much more helpful and beneficial to help have someone else to talk to about them. So there are a lot of support and resources. If you are struggling with loneliness to a great degree, I want you to consider, maybe seeing a counselor, because the counselor can help you come up with a plan to kind of help work through that. And sometimes loneliness can be even facilitated with the emotions that we have that we're just holding in by ourselves, feeling alone and isolated from them. So we have Anne Marie that says that I have friends that do senior exercises, and they ask others to join, and she joined a class in January. Linda says she uses the event page on Facebook. Sherry says, I Google events, but I live in a rural community, so I don't find much. So I can understand that. So, in that case, I would think of like a community center, would think about your library, thinking about any local public resources that you have, and then going from there. But sometimes we just live in very rural areas and there's not as much. But there might be a online thing that you can do that gives you a sense of community. I really wish you guys could see one another and you weren't always just seeing me talk. But there is a lot of online groups, et cetera. There's even the I think it's MSAA has like a monthly art class now, which is really cool. And so there are some other opportunities if you're living in a rural area and you can't quite find some events. But I would say start with all of your public library, senior center. If there is a chamber of conference there, et cetera, that might be a good place. So we're going to talk next about a regular self-assessment. How many of you, I'm sorry, we've got, and we have Joe here. Joe, I'm so glad that you're here. Joe said he found telehealth counseling, and that's worked very well. We saw in the beginning that during COVID that a lot of counseling had to go virtual, and it stayed virtual for many people. It's for some people it can be in person now, but telehealth counseling is very convenient, and that's another way and another easy way to get access to services if you don't have someone in your area or not able to leave your house, et cetera. So we're going to talk a little bit about regular self-assessment. This is not a test, really. It looks like a test. It's a bad image with this slide. But the idea is I want you to practice checking in with yourself. Do you track your moods regularly? Do you track how you're doing? Do you track how you're feeling? If you notice, you don't have to track it every day, but what I would recommend is that if you notice that your mood is been bad like for 3 days in a row, let's start tracking it, because we might understand a little bit more. And if we're doing an assessment of how we're doing, maybe we should track how we're sleeping. And what I will do is I will get a list of all attendees, and I will make sure after this, not tonight and not tomorrow, but this weekend, I will get a daily check-in sheet that you guys could use if you want to. But really to track like sleep, because sleep has a lot to do with our mood and how we feel. And we're not as emotionally resilient if we don't sleep well. And then we want to track our mood in general, but we also want to track other things, how are we feeling physically, et cetera. Or how is our stress level at work or at home? Because everything kind of interconnects and holds hands, I like to say. So I will make sure that you guys get access to a tool. I will make sure that we get that email to you, and I will have a tracker. But checking in with yourself is so important. Dion says, check with local houses of worship for community activities. Thank you so much for that suggestion, Dion. So we're going to talk about this. It's a little bit more from the sense of long-term strategies. So if we can think of this as like a marathon, really all the emotional wellness, the mental wellness things that I share with you, if you can think of it as a marathon, not a sprint. So we don't have to hit it fast, heavy, and hard. We really just have to make sure that we make small goals and small changes. And it takes time to build relationships. It takes time to build community. And what I've learned, many of you on this call are older than me, but what I've learned in my life is that, life has ebbs and flows and you have transitions that happen. And so with relationships, et cetera. And so, one will be, with parenting that changes, you may have changes in your marriage, you may have changes in friendships, you may have changes in your work environment, which changes your social environment. So there's a lot of things that take time and relationships take time to build. So if we can look at this as a long-term strategy, not a short-term solution, you will have much more progress. We will move on to the next slide. So a little bit about peer support. So peer support, this is actually a really good example of peer support because in the mental wellness chat, I want you guys to help each other. And that's why I ask you to put in some advice, some resources, some tips. I can give you professionally some things and personally some things too. But I find that really as a community, we need to do this for each other. So, and with that said, Julie says, Gretchen Holly has a class online every month. Absolutely. And there's also even that is a physical therapy class. And then there's also a Pilates class through MS Views and News. And then, very interesting. And then Linda says, my telehealth therapy copay is $0. If I go in person, there's a charge. Maybe others can get it for $0 as a copay as well. Worth looking into. Thank you for sharing that because I am not familiar. So that is really cool. So utilizing peer support. So as you just see how you guys help each other, and that's important. That's how you make connections. The very interesting thing is that I know so many of you from being on here for so long, for so many years, that you guys kind of know each other in a strange way too. We just don't have the great forum where we can have you guys interacting with each other. Let's see. And so how can you find groups? Well, you can find groups on Facebook. You can, from the MS organizations, all of them, you can find groups that you can access from there that are MS related. There is a website called GroupMe if you have certain interests. Like I love to do long distance walking, et cetera. And so that is something that I'll do is I'll look at the hiking groups and let's see. So we'll definitely know that there's a lot of ways that you can get those resources. David mentions there is an app called I Can. So I'm going to write that down for myself because I'm not familiar with it, but an app called I Can. And then Anne Marie says, if anyone has silver sneakers, you can join classes at local gyms. And that is a great thing, Anne Marie, to share because that is very true. And I know in my area too. So we'll move on to our next slide. And now we're going to go into some other coping strategies. So mindfulness and relaxation techniques can help you if you're dealing with any mood changes, any mental health challenges, etc. This is not going to be the solution to them. You need counseling, sometimes medications, and behavioral activation, and this is a part of that behavioral activation. But breathing exercises, meditation, progressive relaxation can really help you to manage stress and to feel better. one of the benefits too is that with breathing exercises, often that can help to calm your vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve really can help to calm your whole body down. And so there's a type of breathing that is my favorite, and it is the what I call the 2-to-1 breathing, and or the 1-to-2 breathing. So your inhale might be for a count of two, but then your exhale will be a count of four. So your exhale is twice as long as your inhale. So 1-to-2 breathing. And some people can breathe in for a count of four and breathe out for a count of eight, or breathe in for a count of three and breathe out for a count of six. But that can really help to to kind of calm your body. And what I will do is I will make sure, I'm going to make note of this, to add in when I'm sending you the tracker for your moods, and that I will send some of the breathing exercises. So just maybe one or two of them. And then there's cognitive behavioral therapy. So, cognitive behavioral therapy is a great tool. It's as a therapist, I've utilized it so many times, and I utilize it for myself sometimes even now. And as a person, because we're human, and when we're dealing with things, sometimes we have to find ways to kind of catch like a negative thinking pattern, and learn to challenge our negative thoughts. An easier way to talk about this for tonight, though, is to talk about cognitive reframing. And cognitive reframing is, I think, a beautiful opportunity. Um, when we are faced with a challenge, we can change the way we look at it. We can reframe it, and that gives us a little bit of power. Does it mean that we're making it positive and all good? No, no. And I'm not trying to get you to do that, but I'm just trying to get you to see if you can kind of see a different side of it, or a different perspective of it, and it can tend to make things a little bit helpful. So Joe here has some advice, and this is a really good practice. I've shared it on the MS Wellness Chat before, but I'll go over it again. It's called STOP. It's an acronym, STOP. And so for this, it's a mindfulness activity. And for this, you would essentially kind of, if you notice that you're stressed or you're anxious, you literally just stop yourself for a moment. And the T stands for taking a breath, or maybe a couple of breaths. So maybe you'll breathe for a couple of, maybe 3 to 4 cycles. And then the O stands for observe. You're observing your feelings. How is your body feeling? How is your mind feeling? How is your mood, etc. And then the P stands for plan and proceed. What is the next thing that you need to do? And this often can help you to kind of get you really just focused on how you're doing, and kind of refocusing you and shifting on what you have control over and what you need more than anything. And Linda says, she says, yes, I've been finding the silver lining, turning the negative into positive. And that, I think that can help quite a bit. So one thing to think is, so say you were invited to go to Thanksgiving by multiple people, and that stressed you out because you could, of course, only go one place at one time. We're only one person. Then maybe one way to frame it is that a lot of people, that wanted you there. So while it was stressful, you can't be there, and not focusing on the stress of that, but just focusing on that it was that you have gratitude that a lot of people wanted you there, but you of course had to pick what the best place for you to be was. Or people in when it's raining outside, sometimes people say, well, we really needed the rain. That's one way to look at it. And it's okay to say, I don't like the rain, but we need it, so that's that. So it's kind of finding a way to allow yourself to reframe reframe something, or look at something a little bit differently. And so we will move on to our next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about lifestyle modifications. So what, in terms of, mood and how we're feeling, depression, anxiety, I think it's important to think about, are we moving? Are we exercising? Exercising is so good for us because movement and exercise allows us to create some of those positive emotions that, and chemicals like endorphins, and serotonin, et cetera. So, what can you modify in your life that allows some of those happiness chemicals to happen. Another thing is, and I know you love resources. I'm going to share this. One is the importance of a healthy diet. So when you're eating well, you tend to feel better. And this is true for tomorrow. So when if you're eating, most people are going to eat a little bit more than they normally do. But if you eat well, you'll tend to feel better. So just kind of noting that for yourself. So and if you want to eat a lot more, that's okay too. But knowing that you tend to feel better when you eat better. This book here, let's see if I can get okay. See, it's called Food Rules. This was recommended by Megan Weigel, who does some work with MS and Views and News, and I went to one of her programs, and this book is so good. It's so easy, and it's so simple. So, for example, don't eat anything your great grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. Just simple rules. Let's see another one. Avoid foods that have some form of sugar or sweetener listed among the top 3 ingredients. Another one, eat only foods that have been cooked by humans. So this is just a good basic, I have had some processed food before, so I'm not going to lie there, but it's important to have a guide, and I think that book has been very helpful, and it was endorsed by a nurse practitioner. I'm going to read some more comments here because you guys have some good resources. The MS Gym on YouTube. So the MS Gym is great for simple stretching and it helps a lot with movement. Thank you so much, Anne Marie, for sharing that. I know we also with MS Visa News we have Pilates, and if you put in MS exercise, there's a lot of resources there. Mary Davis just asked the name of the book. It's called Food Rules, and it's by Michael Pollan, Pollan. And Dion says, don't be afraid or feel guilty for eliminating some activities from your day to help conserve your energy. Absolutely not. I think when you're living with MS and you have fatigue, you have to kind of find where you fit in terms of your energy level, and kind of you have to sort of figure out how to do things. Joe says, if it doesn't rot, it's not food. Sherry says, author, please again. I think you got it, but it's Michael Pollan. And I just got this off of Amazon. I was at a conference and it was a very good book. So again, when we're thinking about lifestyle modifications, we're thinking about food, we're thinking about how we're eating, how we're sleeping, we're thinking about our overall emotional well-being. Are we interacting with people? What are we doing overall in our lifestyle to help support emotional wellness? So I'm going to go to the question box real quick. How have you coped with loneliness? So if you have dealt with loneliness, how have you coped with it? Or I'll reframe the question too. If you have dealt with sadness during the holidays, because sometimes people have more down moods over the holidays, either stress or a little bit of sadness, maybe a little bit of grief sometimes. How have you coped with that? I will get us started with some suggestions. So for with I've noticed with loneliness or like any sadness during the holidays, etc. One of the things that helps me the most is to have a little bit of a routine. to help me kind of move through my day. And then also to have a blend of things to look forward to. And when I worked with people during COVID, that's something that we really worked on because during COVID, there was a lot of isolation. There was a lot of difficulty with interacting with each other. And so we worked on having little things to look forward to, little things to enjoy, as well as a kind of a, not a super strict, but kind of like a little bit of a routine to help. When instead of a day where I would be by myself, I think, well, I'm going to take myself out to lunch, or I'm going to try a new recipe, or I'm going to watch a movie I've been wanting to watch, etc. So we have Anne Marie that says, the way I deal with loneliness is by thinking about all that I'm grateful for. My medical team is great. My parents help me a lot here at home, and my cats provide comfort. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. And Linda says, I try to find things that make me feel a little bit extra better, like self-care. And that's a really great technique as well. And we have Paula that says, working with my emotional journey and now my self-talk journal, and it helps me be aware of my emotions and can make me more grateful for the things that I do have. That is excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Paula. Joe, Joe, thank you so much for your humor here. Joe says, I've learned telemarketers will talk forever, so you can engage the telemarketers. They probably are actually probably pretty pleased. We'll move on to our next slide. And Dion just had a LOL, which is cute. So building a support system, connecting with support groups, connecting with each other, connecting with people living with MS, making sure that we're communicating our needs with our friends, our family, our healthcare professionals. Again, these are all things that are invisible that we're talking about. And if we need to identify them, but beyond that, we need to share them with people that love us. And then seeking professional help. So recognizing when professional assistance is necessary. We'll move on to, let's go to the next question box. It's 2 slides out. One more slide. So I wanted to ask you as a group, are you looking for a counselor? And if you are, just say yes, no is okay too. And if you see a therapist, how did you find one? And the reason why I'm asking this, I of course know how both of these work, but I want to share and encourage you to, because some of you live in rural communities, so we have someone who does telehealth therapy. We actually have 2 people that do telehealth on here. How did you find your therapist? So I'm going to give you some suggestions. If you are looking for a therapist, if you're looking for a counselor, if you're needing to talk to someone, I always say it's good to start with your MS specialist or your doctor, because they know the people in your community. And you don't necessarily need to see someone who has specialized in MS like me. I think it's helpful to at least see someone who has a lot of experience in chronic disease or grief and loss, because and a really good counselor is going to want to be invested to learn a little bit about MS anyway, so they don't have to know everything. So we have Mary on here that's looking. Linda said her insurance assigned her, and Linda, I guess that ended up being a good match, it sounds like. And then Dion, yes, through employee benefit programs. So in both of those examples, people were led to their therapist through insurance companies, et cetera, and it looks like they've had good experience. Joe says yes, and with Better Health, which is a telehealth organization. Paula says, I have a therapist I work with. Anne Marie says that I have a counselor I see sometimes once a week, and it's been connected with her since she was a long time since she was a teenager. Sherry said that she's looking. David says word of mouth, etc. So if you were looking, if you're not looking, that's okay. We don't need to always have a therapist. I've had a counselor on my healthcare team when I was newly diagnosed, and definitely I think that having a counselor can be a very positive thing in your journey in life, period. And we probably all could use a counselor, to be very honest. And then Kimberly says, I researched bios from psychology today. Thank you so much, Kimberly, because that's actually what I sometimes advise people to do if they were looking. So I would start and you could look at the National MS Society. There may be a therapist that specializes in your area. Chances are there might not be though, because it's like almost a unicorn, unless you live in a big metro area. Starting with your MS specialist might be helpful, or your primary care doctor. You also can look at psychology today, or look at online platforms. You can call your insurance company. Linda just asked, how do you know when you don't need therapy anymore? I think that's a really good question. I think that sometimes it depends on what you're using therapy for. And so, some people, I think, stay in therapy for a lifetime, that they utilize it because they realize it's a place that they can go, and a non-judgmental place, and that they can problem solve whatever's going on in their lives. Some people, as a therapist, I had, that I just saw every month or every other month. Some people I saw weekly that, their needs were much higher. So I think it's very individualized. And there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's good for you and your therapist should kind of always be aware of, when is it discharge for you? When is it time to stop therapy? And a relationship with a therapist is a pretty incredibly special relationship. And some people do continue therapy for a very, very long time because, as I mentioned earlier, life has all these changes and all these ebbs and flows and all these things that happen. So once we think we have it all under control, there's, the other things going on. And it doesn't mean that we can't manage them without therapy. Sometimes just having therapy helps. Scott says, yes, I'm looking for a therapist. My MS people haven't been able to help. So I would kind of expand beyond that, maybe asking around, is there checking with support groups, people that in your circle, and checking to see, with your primary care doctor, etc. Sometimes finding the right fit for a therapist is hard, but I want to give you some encouragement. We have Joe that's used BetterHelp, which means he just signed onto an online platform and got connected to someone that's working. And we have 2 other people that went through insurance companies too, and it sounds like it's been a good fit. So would any of you like more detailed information on anything that I talked about today? Because I'm going to be emailing you the mood tracker and then the breathing techniques. And so I just wanted to see, is there anything that we talked about today that you would like a little bit more information on? If so, please specify what it is that you want more information on, because I might be able to include that in the information. Like, for example, if you're looking for a counselor, I can include, some tools on that. Okay, a list of resources for therapists. Okay, from Mary. And if you don't have, good. Okay, so Sherry says therapy too. So I will make sure I include that in the resources for you. And if you don't have anything that you want to know more in detail, or you're not typing out anything, I want us to kind of, we're almost finished here. We're kind of turning the corner here. I want us to write down one thing that we're grateful for. And I'm not going to say Thanksgiving gratefuls. Let's, just something small. What is something small that you're grateful for? I'm incredibly grateful for this program. And I'm always grateful for it when I'm in the process of doing it, because I just see how much you guys help one another. So Joe wants some information that I have for journaling, and I will send that, because that will be part of that mood sheet as well. So Linda says, being able to play with my granddaughter. And if you don't want to share something that you're grateful for, I want you to internally, think about it. And think about, even, tomorrow as you go into the day, if you are, noticing that your mood is lower, I want you to kind of look around and find little things that you can find that are positive. Like for example, this I love this mug. I don't know, I got it for myself a couple years ago, and it makes me really happy. And so that would be something I probably would be grateful for on a mood. Mary said, I'm grateful for where I live. Carol says, being able to go to Aquafit and see other people. Those are all things to be very grateful for. Julie said, I'm grateful for this group. This is a incredible group. Scott said, I'm grateful for this program as well. This program definitely has been so helpful. I would love to get the word out a little bit more and get it more into some more rural communities and have our reach be a little bit bigger in the new year, I'm hoping. But I love the intimacy of it that we get to have in these conversations. I'm grateful, Paula says, I'm grateful for my son who is an assisted living caregiver in a memory care facility. That sounds incredible. David says, I'm grateful to go out today. And Linda asked how many attendees. Generally, we can have anywhere from up to 70 people and probably as low as like 20 something, but generally on average, we have about 40 to 50 people. It would be how many. So it's a good group. I would like to increase some rural people too, because I know that there's so many people that don't have the access to some of these resources, and they probably just don't know about it. Joe says, I'm grateful for my new wheelchair I got today. That is pretty cool, Joe. I am glad you got that. And Sherry said, I'm grateful for this program. I just wish we could see and talk to each other. Don't worry, I'm trying to problem solve that a little bit. Mary says, thank you. David says, health and life. Anne Marie says, grateful for this program that helps to connect and share tips with each other. Absolutely. I wanted to thank Viatris for their support, of course, and without the mental MSVs and news, the mental wellness chat would not be here. So we are so very thankful for all the support. So I like to say not goodbye, see you later. And the reason why is because this is not a goodbye. We're going to see you next month. You have a community here. You have a resource here, and you are not alone. And I want you to know this, no matter what you're doing, you are not alone. If you are physically alone tomorrow, I hope that you can reach out, connect to someone, or find small pieces of empowerment, or find some tools or strategies, resources to help you as you navigate through the day. If you're not in an amazing mood, it's okay. You are not alone. And I want you to give yourself permission to just be where you are, to remember some of the tools, and to remember that this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. And we're working towards emotional wellness. And with that, I'm thankful for you and happy Thanksgiving.